Welcome everyone to the Financial Engineering podcast. I've got a treat for you today. I have two analysts that are going to talk to us about some interesting topics. They are from a global asset manager based in New York City with about $700 billion under management, just to give you a feel as to where they work. And very simply, we're going to be really addressing two topics with them, natural language processing and alternative data, which is getting more and more press these days, and we'll see how they use it. And so maybe what we could start with is you guys could maybe introduce yourself a little bit, give me a little bit of a background, because I believe one of you is actually an MFE. As well, give a little bit of background and your educational background, and what you do at the firm, and then we could start going into those two topics.
Sure, sounds good. Yeah, maybe I can start off.
Sure.
Yeah. Hello everyone, I'm Vincent Tang. I actually came from a very similar background. I graduated from a Master's of Financial Engineering program from Cornell back in 2016, 2017. So I've been working at AB for 3-4 years around that time, and I'm a Quantitative Research Associate at Alliance Bernstein. My work at AB, well, I spent most of my time doing like traditional quantitative modeling work, but recently I've been spending a lot of time with our data science team and Yuyu specifically on alternative data research, and try to see if we'd be able to use those alternative data to solve some fundamental questions from our investment teams. So that's my current focus.
Yuyu?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Yuyu. I'm data scientist in the data science team at AB. I've joined AB for 3 years, and I have Ph.D. in psychometrics and quantitative psychology, which may not be so familiar with you, but it's basically, using models and data science technologies to analyze psychological data. So it's easy. I transfer my skills into finance. And now work on generally two types of projects. One type belongs to the NLP text analysis, which we name as text analysis lab. Basically, we use NLP techniques to analyze different type of financial documents. And the other project belongs to the using data visualization and more traditional machine learning models to analyze the internal data. So, those interactions between our advisors and the clients to improve our sales process.
Great. So we introduced a bunch of terms. So for the people that don't know, let's try to define first of all, what is natural language processing?
Yeah, sure. So I'll go for this question. For natural language processing, natural language is basically the language we speak, like, the English language and, Chinese, which I often use also. And for those, you use algorithms process the machine readable text. Basically, you can process the sounds, but mostly in our firm, we focus on the text, which already in a plain format. So which we call it machine readable text. And then you can apply different type of algorithm to process them to get the signals you want. For those algorithms, we can talk about the details later.
And what type of coding language do you use to process the data? And where is the data coming from?
Okay, I see. Yeah, so basically, we mostly rely on Python to we use it. And, there's also other types you can use, R, which are popular in academia, and also C++, which are the more basic languages in like algorithm reading. But we mostly rely on the open source packages, which are typically in Python. And for the financial documents, we process those documents required by the regulatory authorities, SEC, and these include the earning transcripts, the filings, 10K, 10Q, and 8Ks. And we also process the central bank statements, and there's also news resources we want to cover. Yeah.
So I guess we're not doing any more financial analysis. We just grab the data and see what the patterns are. Is that what's happening here?
That's what we hope. But typically, you know, data processing and like getting the data will be a lot of work. So for the earning transcripts, which I will focus as an example through the talk, we get it from the vendor. So they basically, after each earning call, they have the transcripts, and then we get their transcripts which already been cleaned up, because you need to have different kind of tags, like what type of speakers it is in these transcripts and what did they see, and what are the different like sections. It need to be nicely tagged in order to be analyzable. But for other type of documents like Tenki and TenQs, we directly script from SEC and do the parsing ourselves.
Well, so basically, where in the past we would, because obviously since you work for an asset management firm, you know, the idea is for you guys to, you know, look for opportunities and trends and where you could invest. Where in the past we would, you know, look at financial information and forecast and valuation. You are trying to pick up on additional information. And Lehigh had done some research like that on IPO, you know, the information containing the IPO, for example, allow us to you know, evaluate what was really going on. I mean, is it a positive message, a negative message? So then you have a reliance on the data that you're getting. Right? That's important, right, Vincent?
Yeah, exactly. I think for the data science team, for our team, we actually spend a lot of time try to make the data correct for the future analysis, like the deeper analysis, and also for the investment teams. That actually takes us a lot of time just to clean up the data, because we want to make sure that we can trust the data. We can trust the analytics based off the data. So that's always the first step, right? And like I think some of the actual use case, it really depends on what your focus is. Like you could, if we're talking about like top-down research, like allocation, sectors, countries, all those stuff, you're probably looking at an aggregate. But if we're talking about, let's say, bottom-up, you want to have a more like a cross-sectional signals or cross-sectional features, then you should probably look at like more those data in more details, or like company level type of characteristics. So that really depends on what you want, where you're looking for. Yeah.
Correct. So since Vincent, speaking now, so let's talk about what is alternative data as a.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah. So
I mean,
think
it's a term. It is a term. If you go on, you look for the word, there is a, and I believe it's used in some quant firms are using them. They're doing systematic fund management, for example. It's used out there. So what is alternative data?
Sure. That's a good question. So I think traditionally, you imagine like people are using a lot of like financial data, those like very, very traditional data to make their forecasts, projections on the financials, all those stuffs. Alternative data, on the other hand, I think it's a trending topic recently. People looking at data that doesn't belong to like company-specific financial, those stuffs, but either on the unstructured side, like they have the filings and corporate filings and the news and or maybe even the earnings transcript of those stuff that's unstructured, that cannot be processed using traditional methods. And second type of alternative data is more like a sector specific. For example, you have transactions, you even have airline pricing, web scraping data, all those stuffs. So I think briefly, alternative data is just type of data that wasn't a focus, let's say back in 10 years ago, where people focused only on the financials or the traditional type of sources to make their forecasts or evaluations on financials or stuff. Yeah, I think that's my definition, or how I see alternative data is. Sorry, Patrick, you're on mute.
And how does this look? How does this relate to sentiment analysis?
Yeah, so sentiment analysis, it really depends on what you're talking about. For example, you're talking about the sentiments coming from text, then we are actually looking at NLP. And as you said, there's so many different ways of looking at the sentiments. You can use either dictionary based. There are like a lot of like either financial dictionary or traditional dictionary that gives you like positive words versus negative words. And you can always calculate different sentiment metrics on top using those dictionary. But also, the second type of sentiment calculation is model based. You can have a target, you can have the sentiment labels and have the machine train on those sentiment labels to recognize what are the positive words and then what are the negative words. Even you can look at like n-grams, looking at the phrases instead of a single word. Do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I want to add that we study sentiment because we have the economic intuition that sentiment really relates to how the market reacts. So then we can use sentiment signals to generate alpha. That's the ultimate goal. We study those sentiment. Yeah, and for the techniques that Vincent already touched on it, yeah.
So I guess what we're saying is that there is an other order of things out there beyond just the financials. There's information out there that obviously was not used before, was available, and I guess now we have the ability to do it. But machine learning has been around for a while, and Python as well. Why is it? Why now? Why is this becoming more trendy or used?
Yeah, as you mentioned, those signals, that's quote unquote signals, already been there for years. You know, people all know that. It's when the market is up, everyone want to buy, and when the market is down, everyone get panic. This is kind of sentiment, you know, around the market. But you know, before 20 years ago, before the really the advance of the the engineering side and the computation side, it is really difficult to process those large number of information, even using computer, let alone like human beings using the brains. So I think nowadays it really becomes a buzzword or hot topic in finance, you know, the fintech things. It is because the advance of technology and also the possibility to process those resources systematically.
Okay, so great. Now we technically, technologically, we're able to do it. That's great. But at the end of the day, if you make recommendation based on alternative data, isn't there a risk? I mean, from a compliance point of view, though, what's the, is it, you know, is there a concern about compliance? Is compliance looking away because you could be making lots of recommendation? I mean, I know Vincent talks about cleaning the data. I mean, it's one thing. I mean, the SEC's got financials, and you rely on that to make a decision. And if you're wrong, you can be sued. But you know, if you're using alternative data, is
I
it
mean,
ring fence in any way? Or?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. But I think it really depends on what you're trying to solve with the alternative data. We are not just like throwing the data into our system and make black box prediction. All the research, most of our research are based on solid fundamental thesis, right? We need to have some fundamental idea behind the model that we're building. If it is just a data mining, if it is just a black box prediction, no one's gonna trust it. Even if we have the like very fancy, very, very good trading strategy, if it doesn't have trading intuition, the fundamental economic intuition behind it, no one's gonna use it. Which is why I think a lot of focus of our work really is on the interpretability, like try to interpret what the machine is doing and how can we understand the prediction, how can we understand the outputs of the models. So I think that's one of the key or the challenge that we are facing in this industry, especially like for the financial world, where everyone wants to understand their model, wants to know what they're investing and if the investment could be persistent in the future, all those steps.
Okay, so maybe since you brought the topic, Vincent, maybe you could talk a little bit about what you're doing, so we get a better feel for your activity.
Sure. You mean like how do we start with the fundamental
Yeah, I
ideas
mean,
in
what
just like,
you mentioned a couple of projects, so what, and then you could do the same, so we get a better feel. Now that we talk about the big topics, let's get into the more, get a better feel for what you do.
sure. I think one of the projects that it did last year was to measure sector competition. The idea actually came from our fundamental team. So what they've seen is for some sectors, for some industries, the level of competition usually gets translated into the future margins returns. So the question came to us, are we able to systematically capture this type of analytics using alternative data? And how can we test those this particular hypothesis, right? So that's actually one of like very good example of starting from fundamental idea, fundamental thesis, and using alternative data to answer that type of question. So what we eventually ended up doing is we combined two types of alternative data sets. One is the Alliance transcripts, and the other is industry supply chain data. Yeah, so we created indicators or signals that captured the competition within certain sectors, and we find those sectors to be very, very useful in terms of predicting the future movement of the margins and returns.
This is quite interesting because not many firms, I mean, the market is still, fundamental based, really. They're still hesitating in just departing completely from that. And I haven't heard of too many firms actually using alternative data yet, to really, merge the, apart from being a pure black box, there's a couple of firms that do actually systematic fund management where they forget the fundamentals, just pure. And Yuyu, what about you?
Since I'm in this area of read reports from different companies, I think now, a lot of the financial companies already established mature teams to study about this, like Morgan Chase, Fidelity, and so it's already been in a good shape for a while. But for about how exactly the performance are and how they incorporate those signals into their strategies, it's mostly proprietary, so it's difficult to know exactly. But I think based on the exchange of the information from the conferences and the papers, the reports, it's already, I think, pushed the market and pushed the shape of the industry very different from how it was before.
Mm-hmm. Mandelbrot wrote a book on the misbehavior of markets, right? And basically, he basically says that we've got it all wrong. And he said that 10 years ago. Basically, we have it all wrong. We're looking at the market as if, we're looking at the fundamentals, right, of the market, trying to understand. We're looking at Markowitz and CAPM ratio and all these things, and think that these are ways for us to somehow able to predict. And these models are not doing great because obviously we had huge amount of uncertainty in the stock market, as we've seen in the past, 2008, 1987. And the idea is to say that maybe we should be looking at it more and, with computers and from more of a distance and see their patterns, not to become a technical analyst, right? A little more complicated than that. But maybe there's something else going on. There's another law that we haven't discovered yet. And maybe that's what we're trying to do here, trying to figure out maybe there's something else going on beyond just the fundamentals that's driving the markets. Without, as Vincent mentioned, going into a black box where we have no idea what this thing is going to spit out, which could be dangerous as well. We don't want all the models to run the stock market either.
Yeah, I agree. And, even when I was in psychology, we kind of have a model, obviously all models are wrong. So don't believe in the models you built. It will give you 100% even or 99% correct answers. But the essence is to use the models to learn some things that, you know, human beings cannot use their brain to summarize. So that's, I think, the advance of data science. It is not to give you like new edges or things that humans don't know, but it is to summarize or automate the information that it is all of the capacity of human brains to process, but which are doable. So that's why, you know, it's the AI, machine learning, those things. I think this is the most advantage. It is to improve the efficiency.
So if you're a student right now, right, you're an MFE student, and you know, on one end you've got the big data because you know basically programs have some finance. I'm sure Vincent knows what I'm talking about, but you studied finance, you studied some math, and you studied some engineering for big data. So, I mean, is it? And they study the behavior of markets, they study marketways, they study the efficient market hypothesis, but also they're studying Python and coding and what Vincent is doing and what you're doing. So where should they be focusing? Which one?
Yeah, I think that's a. I can go first, and then you can follow. Yeah, I think that's a interesting topic because I know specifically for financial engineering students, they have different path and options. For example, you can join a bank, or if you wanted to, let's say, buy side to do the actual investment. Those are type of different career paths they can pursue in the future, right? And the skill sets that going down to this different path might be different. So for the buy side, I think we probably focus more on definitely implementation is important, which is why everyone has to, if you want to be a quantitative researcher, you have to know how to code, how to implement your ideas into production. That's like the baseline. But on top of that, I think we do focus a lot on two different two parts, I would say. First is the finance. We want to have people who know some basics about finance, probably not as deep as like those fundamental analysts, but they should know what's the common valuation metrics that people are looking at, and what's a good company. How do we define a good company, basically? But then on the other hand, we want them to know some basic statistics. Know if we want to build a baseline model to predict using historical data, what are the techniques that we should use? So those are sort of like the fundamentals of going into this buy-side quantitative research type of domain. Well, on the bank side, I cannot speak too much on that because I don't have any bank experience, but I would say people who coming from financial engineering program and eventually end up a career in banks in like session trading or pricing, all those stuffs, they probably focus more on like what we call risk neutral measures and also the modeling from the mathematics side. So that's my own experience, but yeah, you.
Yeah, thank you, Vincent. I think Vincent gives very good practical suggestions to the students about their future career, goals. And for me, because I come from a quite different background, and my suggestion is that it's like which area you focus on at the end, like focus on the traditional fundamental analysis or the quant research, or as a data scientist, process signals more systematically using coding. It really depends on at the end your preference, which you really enjoy doing. Like me, so I have the core skills of model analysis and programming, and then I enjoy processing data and getting insights from it, or test some of the hypotheses and help the end users with it. That's how I end up in finance. So and I think the more you try it, as the financial engineering students, you have the advantage to try the different roles, sometimes in the rotational position. So then you will know, like the more you try, the better you know which you prefer to do at the end. And then that's where you need to sharpen your core skills. Yeah.
I mean, you work obviously for a very interesting firm because, okay, so I guess Vincent, I could understand MFE students. Okay, fine. But you your PhD is technically in psychology, but quantitative psychology. There's no finance involved. There's none of, I mean, and the fact that we're now trying to put the two together and somehow, because, you're totally right. I mean, 1987, there was a survey that was done when the market crashed, right? And they wanted to find out, why did the market crash in 1987? And who did the research? Who did the survey? Forgot his name, but he sent out a survey to 1,000 traders and said, okay, why did you sell on this day? And there was no one specific reason behind it. Robert Chiller. In fact, he wrote a bunch of books about how markets are misbehaving in ways that really nobody really understand. So there is a psychology behind this whole thing as well. And I could see why a firm like yours would say, let's bring these people. It's not just about the fundamental. It may not just be about the data. It could be about something else and trying to find. So it must be a very interesting place to work. Anyway, so any parting comment, Yuyu, about this whole discussion? Is this something that we should be looking for? Is somebody should be concerned? Is somebody you have to be careful about? Some general comment about this alternative data / natural language processing and the investment process?
Yeah, I think at the end, I would like to give a suggestion because in my area, I think it's really about, that saying, stay alert, stay hungry, because there's always new technologies and new papers published every day and new things you need to look at it. So really be mindful about what sources you want to study and also what technologies you want to keep edge on. So, and, study those things, at least get general understanding of it. And one day you need it, you will have the, in your arsenals to apply them. Yeah.
Vincent?
Yeah,
Same
I
thing?
think, yeah. One important thing that I can think about is passion. We always look for people who is passionate about finance, about investing, because you really need to have a strong interest to learn and to not only for your own growth, but for company's growth. We want to have people who can dedicate, who wants to learn the market, who wants to understand the market, even though it is really hard to understand market. But we want the people who have the sort of keen on those kind of things on the markets. So that's probably one of the biggest factor for us to make a decision. Let's say if we want to hire someone or bring someone on board to work on some projects, all those stuff, they need to show interest, right? So that's probably the biggest motivation for them or for us to grow.
Okay, so on this first podcast, I just want to thank you very much for your time. This is quite interesting. It looks like we've got some interesting mix of expertise now in the world of finance. It is changing. And hopefully we could have you back.
Sure.
For more in-depth discussion.
Thank you, Patrick. And I also appreciate this opportunity, to share my experience with the students, with broader audience. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you.